In today's video, we have some trade talk around the New York Rangers as well as the Winnipeg Jets. We have another signing in LA, some more PTOs, a big prediction from EA Sports, and big news on Nathan MacKinnon's next contract. All that and more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a variety of NHL news and rumors to take a look at today. First up, we do have a lot of some quick news items here to talk about. First up, the LA Kings have come to terms with RFA defenseman Durzi. He comes to terms on a 2-year deal valued at $1.7 million. Of course, they recently signed Mikey Anderson, so the Kings now have all their players under contracts. Then takes one more name off the RFA list heading into training camp, which is not all that far away. Of course, I think a deal like this will probably impact Rasmus Sandin. I know he was looking for reportedly as close to $2 million as he could get, but his other concern, of course, is where is he going to play, because he doesn't really see a spot in the lineup given the other defensemen that the Leafs have committed to ahead of him on the depth chart. So obviously good signing for LA. We'll see how this impacts other players like Sandin. Some more PTOs announced here today. The Ottawa Senators have confirmed they're bringing 2 players to camp, both at the forward position. They're bringing veteran center iceman and former Senator Derek Brassard, who's now 35, to camp, and former New York Islander and former first-round pick, 5th overall, Michael Dal Colle. Dal Colle, to me, is at best going to get a 2-way deal. I don't see really him taking a spot from anybody that's already either signed or fighting for a roster spot in the bottom 6. Maybe he's a player that they can sign to add some more depth, a little bit more experience down in Belleville. That's the best case scenario for that. As far as Brassard goes, the hope is that he can give some competition for the 4th line center role. Obviously, Pierre Dorion made note that he's going to come to camp. He's going to show what he has left. He's going to get the chance to play a few preseason games and see where things go. But obviously no guarantees on any PTOs, but we'll see what happens there. The Columbus Blue Jackets have brought in Ben Harper, former Senator and Predators defenseman, on a PTO. And the Florida Panthers are bringing in another goaltender. JF Berube is going to go to Panthers camp on a PTO. They had previously, and actually the team never did announce it, but it was reported about 3 or 4 weeks ago that the Hamburglar, Andrew Hammond, was going to Panthers camp on a PTO. Now there's reports that he's signing in Russia and going to the KHL. So we'll see. That appears to be the case. And another former Senator, Tyler Ennis, also appears to be signing in the KHL on a 1-year contract as well. I know the Edmonton Oilers have been linked to Jake Virtanen. Right now it looks like they're not likely going to end up getting his commitment to come to terms on a PTO. It's believed that the Flames and the Capitals are the other 2 teams that are in conversations with Jake Virtanen, so we'll see where that goes. The Oilers apparently are now shifting their attention for a similar type of role that they kind of had in mind for Virtanen to former Calgary Flame Brett Ritchie. So we'll see. He may end up in Oilers camp on a PTO, and they did confirm they are bringing in veteran defenseman Jason Demers on a PTO. I don't know really what Demers has left, but he's been out of the league for a year, but did play with the Canadian Olympic team and played a handful of games in the KHL last year. The Edmonton Oilers, I believe, are also confirming that Duncan Keith, who recently confirmed his retirement, is going to be signing a new contract with the team to work in player development. Basically sounds like a part-time role, just to kind of dip his toe, so to speak, into working on the hockey side in a different capacity to see what he thinks of it and see where it goes. Doesn't sound like it's any kind of a long-term commitment of any sort in that regard. Of course, I'm sure most of you are familiar with EA Sports, the maker of the NHL video game. They usually make a simulation and predict every year who's going to win the Stanley Cup. They actually haven't been right in a really long time. I believe it's like 11 consecutive years that it hasn't worked out. There was a different cup winner, and not only that, they haven't even had the same right 2 teams in the final in a really long time either. But this year's prediction, based on that simulation, was the Toronto Maple Leafs winning the Stanley Cup. So I know that'll probably excite Leaf fans, but I assure you, don't really put a lot of stock into that. Last year they predicted Florida. The year before that they predicted Colorado. The year before that they predicted Boston, and so on. And so they haven't really been right in a long time. So we'll see how that goes. I'm sure people can talk about it all they want, but generally I see those put out every year right before the season starts, and don't really put a whole lot of stock into it at all. Of course, right now there's an NHL player media tour going on in Las Vegas. Several players have been conducting interviews, lots of talk, lots of chatter, lots of people around media-wise, player-wise, and other roles with the NHL teams. Nathan MacKinnon conducted several interviews today, and there was a lot of comments that were interesting about his next contract. He says that he only wants to be an Avalanche. He wants to play there for the rest of his career, which is great. He also says that he believes that things are trending in the right direction and is hoping to get an extension done before the NHL season actually gets started. He says he was hoping to have it done before this. He has actually said, he was in his mind, the first day he's eligible, that it'd get wrapped up quickly, but obviously that's not how business works. He says it's going to be a fair deal, but it's likely not going to be a single digit, and there's a lot of speculation that Nathan MacKinnon, when we're all said and done, is likely going to end up being the NHL's highest paid player. His last contract was definitely a bargain. It's over $6 million, but when he signed that deal, he hadn't quite yet exploded into superstar status. So at the time, I remember when he first signed it, some thought it was an overpayment. It quickly turned into a bargain contract, and now he's projected to be higher paid than McDavid. But of course, contracts signed at different times, slightly different salary cap situation. The market's changed a bit, and that's the way things go. So Nathan MacKinnon is likely going to get, hard to say exactly what it's going to be, but I'm going to predict it's probably somewhere around 13 to 14 million on an 8-year deal. He did say, though, this is the part that I guess would probably concern Avalanche fans, is that if it's not done by the start of the season, then he might cut off talks. So he obviously doesn't want a distraction, wants to focus on hockey, and I get that. A lot of players say that. And there would still be a lot of time after the season's over to before free agency, of course, depending on how the Avalanche do. If they go deep and come close to winning another Stanley Cup, then there won't be as much time. But still, it'd be nice just to have it done with, so he gets done. He can focus on hockey. Everybody can just relax and kind of move forward there. But MacKinnon on pace to be the NHL's next highest paid player. A couple of tidbits from the latest 32 Thoughts podcast. They were talking a bit. Jeff Merrick had a bit of information on Montreal Canadiens prospect Philip Mesar, who was the second first rounder, of course, fellow countryman to Juraj Slafkovsky, Slovakian, and rumor has it from Merrick that he will be playing in the OHL this year. So he's going to stay in North America and play for the Kitchener Rangers, who hold his rights. So expect that after Habs training camp, he will go to that and see where things end up. But considering how many forwards they have, I just don't see a scenario where Mesar would go right to the NHL. So going to Kitchener makes a lot of sense in that regard. The Jordan Kyrou contract's probably going to cause a bit more of a delay here, I think, in the Jason Robertson deal. They talked about this on the 32 Thoughts podcast. It does make a lot of sense that with the Kyrou deal, considering that Kyrou's a little older than Robertson, hasn't scored 40 goals like him, that Robertson's price probably have gone up, seeing some of these other contracts that we've seen here recently. So it's going to be, I tell you, I'm not sure whether he's going to be there on day one of training camp. It just sounds like it's really tight, but Friedman went on to say that he doesn't really see a scenario where they can probably do a long-term deal. I mean, it is possible if you really use your cap projections and look at where things are going. Rumor has it we'll probably get a $1 million cap increase for probably 2 more seasons, and then it's going to take a big jump after that, probably like $8-9 million. There's some are lobbying the NHL to maybe do like 3 years of $3 million instead of 1 and like 9, but that's not what was agreed to in the memorandum of understanding in the new CBA. So we'll have to see. The NHL may not budge on that front. But Jason Robertson contract obviously still a big topic of debate here. And some of these other contracts are not making it any easier on the team to come to terms with their 40-goal scoring young sniper future superstar here. Now, of course, a couple of items on the trade front. The New York Rangers, as we know, had received a trade request from young defenseman Nils Lundqvist. We did hear comments from general manager Chris Drury talking about the situation, talking about how he's a good player. He's hoping to have him at camp. Said all kind of the right things. Doesn't sound like he's in any rush to trade him. But at the same time, if he gets the right deal, I think they'll pull the trigger. The rumor has it is that he's looking for a young centerman. in return. I mean, which makes sense. Like I said, I don't expect them to get another D-man in return. They've already are pretty deep on the blue line with guys locked up long term. They're all fairly young. So it doesn't make sense to be trying to get another Nils Lundqvist in return if you can. You might as well go for other areas. I mean, they're not too bad at center, but it's an area where you can never really be too deep in, and I don't think they're in a spot with their prospects and everything that they can say they're set for like a super long time, especially with some players on the roster still, not really 100%, kind of solidified, you could say, on the roster. So we'll see where things go on a Nils Lundqvist trade. As I mentioned before, there was a few teams that were linked to him. I know there was a lot of talk about Montreal. Hard to say what they do there. They do have a deep prospect pool. They could probably find a young centerman that the Rangers would be interested in. I do think that there's a good solid potential for a connection there for those two teams to hook up on a deal. But I'm not sure what obviously Ken Hughes and Jeff Gorton are willing to pay his Gorton's former team to get a guy like Nils Lundqvist, but certainly something that is still being worked on. At least they publicly acknowledge the trade request, so at least we can now totally confirm that is legit. Lundqvist does want to trade, and Drury is working on it, but hopes to see him at camp, and doesn't seem to be too pressured or too rushed, and really rightfully so. I think the Rangers kind of have the leverage here in a way. If he wants to play hockey, he's got to show up, and he's got options to play. So to me, I'll be interested to see where this goes and what happens if he isn't traded by the time camp opens next week. Now, some trade talk around the Winnipeg Jets. I know there's some latest reports in The Athletic from their beat writer talking about a variety of things. For one, they did try to trade Captain Blake Wheeler. That was a guy mentioned in the rumor mill often in the offseason, and there was a lot of confirmed reports there from the Jets reporters that he indeed was on the market. They were trying to trade him, but because of his hefty contract, 2 years left, over $8 million, it was very challenging, so they never really were able to get too much traction on finding a spot that he and the team could agree on where they could get something completed. So I do think that a divorce with their captain is still something that we might see in the next throughout this season. It is possible as the year goes on, time ticks off his contract, it does get a little bit easier. Also confirmed reports that they did indeed really seriously consider trading Mark Scheifele, who we know ended the season with some interesting comments and made a lot of people think that he wanted out and may not be back to Winnipeg. We thought the Jets might be going through a major overhaul, possibly trading their top duo here in Scheifele and Wheeler, who's been playing on the top line minutes with the Jets for quite some time, and for the most part have had a fair bit of success as well. But Scheifele is coming back. Now, of course, he has 2 years left on his contract as well. And the main reason why he was not traded was because of the fact that Pierre-Luc Dubois would not sign a long-term extension. I mean, it makes sense. They plan to build around Scheifele and Dubois, and they could end up in a situation where they could lose both within 2 years or less. We know that Pierre-Luc Dubois can be an RFA again next year because he only signed a 1-year contract. After that, he's UFA, so he could do a 1-year deal and a 1-year deal and be UFA, and the Jets could be faced with having Wheeler, Scheifele, and Dubois all UFA all at the same time if they're all still part of the franchise. That could be a time when we see significant change and major overhaul. That much we can say for certainty. I mean, off of that point, Scheifele and Wheeler are going to be a little bit older as well. I don't know. I mean, Scheifele could still possibly stay if it's still a good fit for both the team and the player, but at the same time, it's going to be a different looking contract at that stage of his career. We know all the rumors about Dubois to Montreal. I would suspect as Montreal, plays out their season and Winnipeg does theirs, that we're probably going to hear more about this as the season goes along. Hard to say if those two teams actually do end up at some point working on a trade, because it seems pretty apparent that that's where Dubois wants to be. There was a lot of talk that the Habs were interested in him as well, and at least it would be better for Winnipeg to get something in return rather than let him walk for nothing in 2 years' time, because they could be looking at the same potential scenario with Scheifele and maybe with Wheeler if they can't get him moved too. So, as I mentioned before, I think the Winnipeg Jets are going to be a fascinating team to watch the early part of the season, because I think there's a ton of pressure there. And if they get off to a slow start and things are not trending well for the playoffs, then I think that we could see a big overhaul. Like, I understand the reluctance to trade Scheifele because of Dubois not signing and all that, but they got to figure something out, because they're going to be in a situation where all three of these players could be as good as gone within the not too distant future, and they may not get a whole lot of anything in return if they don't play their cards right. So certainly something we need to keep an eye on in Winnipeg. I think if we see a slow start, we're going to see some big changes. They've already changed the coach. Rick Bowness will be taking over behind the bench this year, and that's their next move is a major surgery to the roster and to the lineup, and that's what's coming next if we have a slow start in Winnipeg. So let me know your thoughts on everything discussed here today down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.